One of the other resources that nature gives us is extreme temperatures. And when I say this, it might sound negative at first, like who wants to live in extreme heat or extreme cold? And we're not talking about living there. We're kind of talking about visiting every now and then. But it can be very beneficial for your body to go, a good bit above your 98.5 temperature or a good bit below that temperature. Expose your body to that. Let me explain what I mean by that. Here are some of the benefits that we can see from using extreme temperatures as a resource. We can reduce the inflammation in our body. When we reduce inflammation in our body, that improves pain, either at a particular spot or just overall. We can relax our body, improve our sleep, and also help regulate our nervous system. Remember, we talked about sensation is the language of the nervous system. And so the feel and the change in temperature, either high or low, hot or cold, and we'll talk about that in a minute, really can signal to our nervous system that it needs to shift and regulate. So this kind of activates our brain, right? Like when you feel something really hot or really cold, your brain sends a signal throughout your body that to be aware or alert to that. And this can be helpful when we're trying to signal change to our nervous system or change it into certain ways. And because temperature, the cold restricts muscles and the hot expands them, that can really be helpful in just our body overall being able to do that work of, shifting into a more relaxed state. Especially, if you hold your fists real quick and just squeeze them for just a minute, just a few minutes, do that squeezing work, and it may not even be comfortable to do the constricting, but once you relax, like, do you feel that just your body, it almost goes into your entire body when you relax that. And so when we're talking about hot and cold, this can help us do some of that work. It activates our brain in different ways. This can also help heal our body. I used to work at a chiropractor's office, and I remember the most often prescription that he would give to anybody who came into the clinic and had pinpointed pain, just pain somewhere in their body. He would say, I want you to go home and I want you to ice this spot for 20 minutes and then put heat on it for 20 minutes. And in doing that, it's doing that constricting and relaxing work, and you get some pain relief from that. But you also reduce the inflammation by doing that. Just the cold temperature reduces the inflammation, and then the heat helps your everything to relax. And so even in just using those extreme temperatures, you can see some improvement. And he would recommend that over taking, any type of over-the-counter medicine, which, a lot of times those can, even if they don't have short-term side effects, can have long-term side effects to our body. So anytime we're taking consistent amounts of even over-the-counter medicine, it can be doing damage to our body as opposed to improving our body. So anytime we can find a resource that's going to work, anywhere near the same, give you a result without having to do that medication, that's always a good thing, right? So let's talk about hot, how some things that we talk about when we are talking about hot. Obviously, hot water can help us to signal relaxation to the nervous system. As a matter of fact, one of the things I've learned to do when anxiety starts to rear its ugly head in me, especially if I'm out in public, I do this many times when I have doctor's appointments, because that's just anxiety producing for anyone. But I tend to be over the top when it comes to those things. But I'll go to the bathroom and I'll just run my hands under some really hot, as warm as I can stand it, water. And after a few times of doing this, it really has trained my body to react to it. So as I do that, anytime I wash my hands now in warm water, I just feel this relaxation, kind of this settling kind of come over my body. That doesn't mean that anxiety is not going to flare again, but it gives you this, it gives you this back up into regulation of your nervous system, that rest and digest, get back to that baseline. And then, the fight or flight or the shutdown is not as overwhelming. And so hot water is a good resource. I also use a hot tub. We've had a hot tub for a few years now. We invested in it a while back because my husband and I both have back pain and back issues, and we found one of the best remedies is just getting in the hot tub for 15 to 20 minutes on a consistent basis, and this just relaxes your entire body. You're soaking in that hot water. That could also be, people who love to take warm or hot baths. That's a good way to get that resource as well. And then there's saunas. There's people sit in saunas, and that can even help detox in some ways. It helps your body to sweat out some of the toxins that it's holding on to and relaxing you at the same time. They even have these now sauna blankets that you can buy, or, to just like put yourself in a blanket sauna for however many minutes to work. I would recommend working up to a certain time in this kind of extreme temperatures when you're sweating a lot, because you are not only losing toxins, but a lot of times you're losing nutrients, and you're definitely losing electrolytes. So you want to hydrate really well, and you want to definitely listen to your body and just work up to a place that, work up gradually, because you can get all sorts of lightheaded and, just all sorts of negative symptoms from that. And we don't want that. We want to stay in this range where this is helpful to our body and not harmful. Cold, there's a lot of hype right now. It's a trend to do like ice baths, to get into icy cold water, or even water with ice in it, and to sit in that for how many ever minutes that you can sit in it. And it is very helpful to your body to do this. Not only does it, give a surge to your brain of energy, but it's constricting. It's doing that constricting work over your entire body. And so when you get out, you're going to have that relaxation effect. I've heard of people doing this before bed, before they go to sleep, because they'll get that contraction of all of their muscles, and then they get into bed and they sleep. They say they sleep so good. It's also good to get out in the cold, just in general. When the temperatures are cold outside, we tend to want to stay in the house a lot, but it's so good for our bodies. It really helps and improves our mitochondria, which mitochondria is like the powerhouse of our cells. So it helps, it gives our cells some help in building up better. And the cold just kind of activates all of that in your system. Like I said, in this whole course, I like to remind you of the disclaimer that I'm not a medical professional. I do not have any degrees or, anything like that. And so you can research some of these things if you're more interested in knowing, more about them. You can find that. One of my husband's favorite things to do is combine the hot and cold. And like I said, my chiropractor, when I worked at his office, and I think a lot of chiropractors and even doctors recommend the hot-cold combo. My husband loves to get in the hot tub at night, and then he'll get into the cold pool, and then he'll get back into the hot tub, and he'll do that a few times. And it's one of those things that he swears by, as far as like in improving sleep and energy and just overall how his body feels. He has a lot of he's had back surgery, neck surgery. He's had all the things going on in his body, and so he needs that extra that extra resourcing of his body. And, you know, I think that we all do. I think that it's good for us to use these things when we have access to them as a resource. Another hot and cold thing that I do is I have like a cold compress thing that I keep in the freezer or the fridge if the freezer's too cold for you. And I will put that on my back sometimes, or, you know, any area in my body where I just feel like it's uncomfortable or it's hurting or I'm really sore. And I will leave that on for 15 to 20 minutes, which I will say for me, the cold is the most uncomfortable. For some people, it's the opposite. They prefer the colder temperatures to the warmer temperatures. I prefer the heating pad. So as soon as that, 20 minutes is over, I am quickly pulling out that heating pad and switching it out to that. But I do that a few times in whatever area I'm struggling with at the time, and that tends to help relax and reduce pain. It also relaxes just me entirely. My body, my brain kind of signals, now that I do it almost every night, it signals to my brain that it's time to wind down. It's time to let go of those cares of the day. That sensation helps to signal my brain and my nervous system. So I would not sleep on the hot-cold combo. Also, we want to make sure that we don't overdo hot and cold, right? If we're, we're limiting this to short spurts of time, short amounts of time. We don't want hypothermia, and we don't want, to pass out from dizziness or high blood pressure, any of those things that might come with overdoing hot, to get dehydrated. We want to hydrate well while we're doing this, and while we're doing life in general. We just want to make sure we're staying hydrated, because that's going to help us feel at our best. We definitely just don't want to overdo anything. There is a balance to it, and it's much about listening to your body, but also having just some guidelines. I would say 15 to 20 minutes, either hot or cold, would be your limit, especially starting out, and how long you go with those things. And then, as our bodies just naturally build tolerances to things. And so as you do it, when you get in the shower and you get used to the water, and then you're like, I just need it a little hotter, and you're just like inching up that dial, inching it more and more. And I'm not talking about when the hot water's running out. I'm just talking about when you want it to be a little bit hotter, because our body builds up a tolerance to the temperature. So, you might be able to build up more of a tolerance and do things for longer, but I think the safe factor is like staying within that 15 to 20 minutes. So, supplies, let's talk about this for a minute. We've talked about some of them already. I am a firm believer in investing in, a hot tub. That has been one of the biggest game changers for my husband and I, as far as our bodies are concerned and our pain levels, especially if you have issues with like your back or neck. And I know so many people do in this day and age. Because the way we sit and we're at computers, and there's just all kinds of things that happen in our bodies where we get stiff. We have so much tension and we're under stress. A hot tub can help tremendously with that. A sauna is another thing that could be invested in. Ice bath as well, which I feel like you could create a ice bath, in your bathtub with just a bunch of ice. You also could use your bathtub, if you have a big enough one, to soak in hot water. So that could also be a way to use this resource. But the hot tub has just been so great. It's outside too. It's in nature. And if you do it at night, it's under the stars, under the moon. There's just something about it that's just so much a resource. And I know they're pricey. They can be pricey. You don't have to get the most pricey one. And I'm going to put some suggestions in the description. We had one recently. We just recently put in a pool, so we have a hot tub attached to that. But we had a standalone one that actually just plugged in to your outdoor outlet, and we loved it. It was great. And so I will put a link to that in the description. But I understand, these things can be pricey. It might be something you want to save up for, but these are can be very helpful resources. A hot tea or cold lemonade, if you can't afford a hot tub, you can probably afford some hot tea or a cold drink. During the summer months, we go for those cold iced drinks, or vice versa in the winter. And part of the reason we do that is because, it's hot outside or it's cold outside and we want something to warm up. But I think another part is because these are such a good resource for our nervous system. The extreme temperatures, the hotness, the warmth of the tea, or the coldness of the, lemonade or whatever it is, iced coffee, whatever you like to drink. Hot coffee instead of hot tea. Our bodies naturally turn everything to our body's temperature once they're consumed. So it has cold lemonade doesn't truly cool you down because your body will raise that to the temperature that your body is. A hot drink doesn't truly warm you up, but this is signaling to our brain, right? And signaling to our nervous system, and there's a little bit of warmth to it as it goes down. That's, and so that signals to our brain a little bit of heat. It also signals to our nervous system that, oh, this is relaxing, this feels safe, this feels warm, this feels cold, refreshing, all of those good things to the body. So they can really just signal those things to us. And then what I talked about earlier with the heating pad. I love my heating pad. I use it absolutely almost every night. And then many nights I add in that cold compress. So I do the 15 to 20 minutes with the cold and then the 15 to 20 minutes with the heat. And that really does some good work to my muscles. And so I would fully recommend that. These are resources that aren't very expensive. And so I will put some suggestions in the box below too, so you don't have to go searching all over for those. And hopefully you can find things that work for you when it comes to extreme temperatures. But this is a resource that can help us tremendously if we learn how to use it correctly.